Alright, so I don't even feel like talking right now, but I'm going to anyway. So one of the things that is just one of the things that I find very, very helpful in especially today's society of digital age, digital world where people are actually faced with the biggest distraction, and it is not their phones. It is their mind. It's what happens after they get off their phone, which is the bombarding of thoughts, ideas, music, and sounds that they've heard from being on social media. And I feel like there's a lot of emphasis on how to get off of social media and, demonizing social media. But I think there should be equal emphasis on how we decide to utilize our time when spent off of media. And one of the ways in which we can actually still use our beloved media while still being able to uphold ourselves as our own individual human, without our minds taking over or being drawn back to those metaverses, is by placing our attention and awareness on the activity of our minds. And so one of the ways in which this happens is, I say it like this: I don't give my thoughts the time of day. And what that does is it literally dismantles the power of generative ideas that just come from being on social media for hours or even after a few minutes. The way it lingers on the mind is what's most powerful and what can serve as distractions when we tap back into reality. And so when you say, I don't give my thoughts the time of day, you are basically signaling to yourself that whatever thoughts, ideas, sounds, musics that come up in your mind, you are not giving it any extra attention the same way that you would when you scroll onto a video and maybe decide to leave a comment, or maybe you decide to open up the comment section, engage in that, right? When you think about your thoughts, we subconsciously or unconsciously most times, we treat them as if they are comment sections. And so we don't necessarily identify with them, but we do engage with them, where we'll find ourselves on maybe one thought, and then we'll kind of click on that thought, and it opens up a whole type of world, which then sends us into this spiral kind of effect where you have this one thought that led to another thought that led to another thought and an idea, which then stimulated your emotional response to this thought. And so that's kind of the same way in which media is used. And so we just don't want to do that. And so the challenge here would just be to don't engage with your thoughts the same way that you engage with people on social media, right? Social media doesn't need to be the bad guy, but neither do you. And so the more that we just learn to treat our thoughts as a cloud passing by in the sky, where you can look at it, but you can't actually go up and touch the cloud without like a plane, right? Like you'd have to put immense effort into trying to touch a cloud, right? And so I would just treat your thought as just a passerby. It's a passenger. Not all of them need attention. Not all of them also need to be conversated with. Like there doesn't need to be dialogue. There are a lot of inflated views and concepts and ideas by what thoughts are. We put a lot of terms and labels behind them. And when we do that, that is the thing that spikes the emotional aspect behind certain thoughts. Our thoughts can be as neutral as long as you aren't feeding into them. But the more you feed into your thoughts, even through your observational perspective, meaning you can probably observe your thoughts and still label them as something negative or even positive. But those words are what give rise to an emotional pattern or an emotional category where now your thoughts are categorized into good and bad. That, again, is what causes emotional, I'd say, reactions or responses to certain thoughts. And that doesn't help with not giving your thoughts the time of day. The key is to just allow your thoughts to be a thought, and then to leave it as that. There's no need to delve into it. Now you're probably wondering, well then if my mind isn't used as a thinking tank, then what can it be used for? Well, the mind is much more than just a thought bubble. It doesn't just hold thoughts. It doesn't hold thoughts at all, actually. You choose what thought to click on. Similarly, you choose what video to engage with. So the mind, once you basically overcome that level, you pass level 1, which is not giving your thoughts a time of day, you now have access to level 2. And this is where your mind is able to clear away the clouds, and you're able to use the mind in a way that that serves you. I had an idea, but maybe it'll come back to me once I tell this part of it. So basically, my experience with thoughts is that sometimes they'll linger. Sometimes conversations in your head. Oh, yep, here we go. So sometimes you'll have conversation in your head about maybe something that someone said, maybe something, or something that you saw or you perceived. You don't want to, it's not that you don't want to do that, but there's literally no reason to do that. Because it's just, again, it's like engaging in a comment section when you're having these conversations in your head about things that aren't going to take place in reality. And so the next center state that your mind can be used for at level 2 is a reflective bubble. Okay, it's a reflective space now. Instead of being a thinking space, it's now a reflective space. Now, what do I mean when I say reflective? There are a couple of things that come up in my head when I say the word reflective. Reflection can be like mirror. Reflection could also be thought of as a thought in and of itself, because when you have thoughts, they're usually reflecting on moments or events that occurred in the past, but they don't serve mere purpose. They're not core things that you should be reflective on. You know what I mean? They're more like the little distraction thoughts, that once you clear and make space away from it, once you stop giving them the time of day, your mind will be able to actually bring you toward the events and moments that you should click on and reflect on, because that will serve you. Though that reflective thought will serve you. It's not going to come up as a series of thoughts. It'll be one recurring one, and that's how you know that one is the diamond, right? That thought is the diamond in the rough, but you cannot reach it if you haven't trained your mind to rid itself of clearing out those other thoughts that arise similarly after scrolling on endless social medias. You know what I mean? That serve as more distraction. Okay? So yes, that's pretty much all I wanted to say. It's important that I find that the more I practice this, the more I'm able to just journey on my day in a way that doesn't hold on or linger on to moments that no longer exist and that never needed extra emphasis or needed extra say or needed extra emotion behind it. I can literally just move on accordingly and not in a sense and not linger onto emotions that also don't need to be held on to either. Because oftentimes what happens is when you linger on moments and you do decide to engage with the passenger thoughts or the clouded thoughts, the ones that look more like social media comment sections, where it's just like they're not much value, you do tend to linger onto those emotions, because once the emotion sets in, once you've clicked further enough and went through all these different search histories and rabbit holes of your thoughts, emotions begin to arise. And once the emotion sticks to thoughts, it's really a challenge. It becomes a real challenge to literally guide yourself out of that, because now it's found an anchor point through your emotion, through your heart. And once that thought has found that anchor point to anchor in itself onto, now it's going to take even more willpower from you to pull yourself away from the emotion, to pull yourself out of the rabbit hole you went down. It's not as easy as clicking the back arrow as it is on TikTok or any of those other, Instagram, whatever. It's not that simple. It's a lot more difficult, and it is simply because the emotion can linger on even after you maybe have lifted yourself from the thought. At that point, the emotion just has to be what it is. You know what I mean? And so me personally, I'd rather not put myself in that position. So you have to not want to be in that position. And there are different stages of this. There are people who do this, who are adapted to this and have adapted to this. And so it can be a lot more difficult to kind of become more conscious of, because it's become a part of them. But nonetheless, if you choose to, if you decide to, it is always possible. So take a chance on yourself, if you will. All right. That's all I have. Thanks for listening.